Did you know, America, that billions of dollars, let me say that again, billions of dollars over the last 10 years have been paid to family members of people who have been murdered by cops? Now, I know what you're going to say, we're a sue happy kind of people, but let's be very clear. This is blood money, and blood money will not buy safety. But you know what will buy safety and security? Prosecuting these motherfuckers and putting them behind bars. Look, accountability is the only thing that is going to bring true change to this country.
Ooh, this little hussy right here. Boy, you hear what she just said? She said, prosecute these. Listen, if I'm driving down the freeway, homie, and you pull me over, remember, she said it, not me. But shit's so true. Blood money don't do shit to stop the violence. Hey everybody, my name is Richard Thomas.
And I'm Tiffany Thomas.
And we want to welcome you to the Lionheart Institute podcast. This table talk is one of my favorite.
Of course.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be powerful. And when you hear this little lady, what she has to say.
Ooh, watch out.
We need to address it. And so there's been some things that have happened in our recent culture really going on in current events right now that are reflective of an imbalance in people's thinking. Bias, assumptions, police brutality.
Right.
I would love it if you would kind of list some of the things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, the first one I think that we're going to hit on is some of the updates with George Floyd. And then, of course, Derek Chauvin, who's the former officer who
That's awesome.
murdered him. One of the big things, and this was a really big deal, it kind of started this whole video is the topic of settlements. Well, George Floyd's family was just awarded the largest settlement ever paid out in what they deem a police misconduct civil lawsuit case. Yeah. And it was $27 million. So $27 million, highest amount ever paid out for wrongful death, police misconduct cases.
What good is that $27 million to George Floyd?
Right. Now, in addition to the $27 million, they actually awarded another $500,000 donation to the community surrounding the cross streets of where George Floyd was murdered. So they've donated
for the trauma they experienced.
Yes, to help rebuild that community up and whatnot. So they donated another $500,000 towards that as well. And I think it's so important to really understand that lawsuits like this are paid out because they know that they are guilty. Period.
Right.
But they want to be able to maintain. Let's just make it quiet. They don't want to, the police departments don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to, prosecute their cops, as much as possible. So these lawsuits are paid out because they know that they're guilty. I mean, it's a really pretty simple, cut and dry case.
Now, obviously, it's going to become much more complicated. When we jump into the actual court case of prosecuting for murder, second degree, third degree, and so forth. But when you look at the case and just as a novice, right? Yeah. We're not gonna talk all the different things they're gonna talk in the court case. It was open and closed as far as let's pay this family, right?
Yeah, it was a unanimous vote.
Right. It was very quick. It was not prolonged. There was not an in-depth bullshit game that was played with evidence and angles of camera and whether or not the false statements of what was in his blood and what wasn't in his blood. There's none of that. Now, all of those things will be introduced because all they have to do is create a shadow of a doubt, right?
That'll be introduced on the actual murder case.
Right. But to look at it from the perspective of guilt, shame, embarrassment, they looked at this and said, this is blood money. We need to cover this up as quickly as possible and move forward. But the responsibility that we have as citizens of this great nation is to never move on.
Yeah.
Is to 9/11 this motherfucker.
Right.
And sit on this topic until we see change in our judicial system.
Absolutely.
And in our policies of policing. So we talk about it as a current event and, I throw up on my page, Black Lives Matter. I get 400 comments. Right? Just of negative bullshit. You know, how dare you say Black Lives Matter, all lives matter.
All lives matter.
I take it to the next step. I throw on there, unfortunately, in Georgia, which I know we're going to do a video that's coming up. You're going to love this video because Tiffany's putting a ton of work into it, researching the violent crimes committed against different racial groups and so forth throughout history. But you look at that situation, and I put up Asian Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Got 400 negative responses, right? I throw up Boulder Lives Matter, and it's crickets.
Yep.
For days, for a week, right? Until finally somebody says some lives matter.
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing is I would never say some lives matter. All lives matter, but they only matter in context to us helping those that are hurting the most, right? And so when we look at helping those that are hurting the most, George Floyd, bring us up to speed with that, because it's a community that's still reeling in pain.
It sparked, protests, massive protests last summer, and riots and violence, unfortunately ensued from that. There's a lot of disagreements on who's responsible for the violence and the damage, and that's a whole nother topic. But it definitely, it was kind of the breaking point, I think, for people, especially for people of color, that said enough is enough.
And we're here in COVID,
Right.
We're stuck having to hear and see, and it may be the best thing that's happened to the racial reality in our country in a very long time.
I think it's brought everything full surface. It's out in the open. There is no cover up anymore. People, if you were not aware of what is happening, if you do not see the truth of what is happening, then at this point you are making a conscious choice to not see it, to not see the truth for what it is. I mean, there's really no sugarcoating it anymore.
There's no getting around it.
There's just not. Yeah. And so, with what happened with George Floyd's murder and what that sparked. And then, of course, now we're dealing with a situation where we're pretty much up to this point. Cops being prosecuted for these crimes just really hasn't been a thing.
Right.
There are rare situations that there has been one or two cops that have been fired or let go, or small prosecutions. Most of them have been thrown out. Very few cops have ever actually gone to jail for this stuff.
It's very interesting if you look at it. Most of those who have been imprisoned have been minorities.
Yes, they were cops. They were people of color.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
As Arsenio used to say with the great second movie, Coming to America 2, things that make you go,
Yeah, I mean, we know the black cop who killed the white lady went to jail pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so now we have, I think it was 4 cops, right? We've got these 4 cops who were all directly responsible for George Floyd's murder. So Derek Chauvin, he was facing manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter, and second-degree murder. Okay. The third-degree murder was on the table initially, and then a judge threw it out, said he didn't really qualify for that, so these are the 2 charges we're going with. Well, just recently, a few weeks ago, a judge decided that nope, he does qualify to add a 3rd charge, and we're putting back third-degree murder.
Good.
Now, the reason why this is really important to understand is because second-degree murder charges comes with a 40-year life sentence, okay? But second-degree manslaughter is only 10. Now, this is maximum of 10, so he could get anything.
2 weeks.
Right. I mean, he just can't get any more than that.
Yeah.
So that's a big gap. We're talking 40 years, 10 years. Well, third-degree murder comes with a potential of 25 years sentence with that. So it's kind of a middle ground between the two. So now, jurors have an option to look at all 3 charges and be like, okay, well, what makes the most sense with the situation? So it was actually a pretty big deal that they added the third-degree murder charges back in there. It's been really interesting. The trial is now underway, but it took a minute to get there because his attorney basically, they could not get any jurors for this case. He threw out pretty much all the original jurors because anybody who had seen the video of George Floyd's death, he wanted completely disqualified. Well, I mean, how do you do that? Pretty much, I think everybody in the country saw the video footage of his death.
In modern era, you've got it not only on television, which you looked in the past, you would have major networks, right?
Right.
CBS, ABC.
Right.
You might catch it on Fox or CNN or something of that nature. But now you literally have it on TikTok,
yeah,
and on Facebook, and our favorite, YouTube. So with subscribe. Right now would be a good spot to take
absolutely
the time out, hit that subscribe button. But how do you find a potential jury that hasn't seen it,
right,
and at the same time has a degree of an ability to sit on that kind of a jury?
Right. Well, and so he had several jurors dismissed originally because of the video footage. They finally did bring out all new jurors again and agreed on it. But then his Chauvin's attorney came out and says, well, now that there's a settlement of the $27 million to George Floyd's family, well, we can't have anybody as a juror who knows about that.
Right.
Because
we know that's blood money.
Because it's blood money. Right. So now he's like, well, we can't have any jurors sitting on there that know that the family was awarded $27 million because that's basically guilt.
Sure.
Right? So there was a lot of drama. I believe the judge eventually said, okay, enough is enough. At this point, it is going to be very difficult to find anybody, and we have to move forward with this trial. Right. So at this point, we're now starting with the trial. Haven't seen any footage on it yet, but
it's been intense.
We're moving forward with it.
I've watched some great commentaries on it, and it's intense. It's going to be quite the trial.
It's going to be really interesting, and a lot of people. I mean, we saw unfortunately what happened with Breonna Taylor's case, and that was a disgrace beyond words, what the Attorney General did with that. And so we saw the injustice with that. And so there's a lot, I think, writing on this case with these cops being prosecuted for George Floyd's murder. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think it could have a humongous impact on how we move forward as a society.
It'll be a very long time for me. Anytime, I almost broke out in tears just hearing the name Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
And so it'll be a very long time for me to be able to emotionally move on from what the U.S. government, and that's the people, of the people, for the people, by the people, did in relationship to the Breonna Taylor case.
I mean, you're looking now that her boyfriend has been acquitted of any charges whatsoever. He was being blamed for the whole incident basically in the beginning. Now they're saying they're not pressing any kind of charges. Everything's been dropped. Her family's been awarded $12 million for her death, and still there's no justice.
I think that it's probably the most heartbreaking public presentation of a case that was totally screwed up by a person of color that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And it was sabotaged.
Yeah.
And so my soul just, it's ripped open by it. Right. Anytime you have charges for missing an unarmed person in contrast to killing that person, how do you even process that? So if you're watching this, and obviously you have a young person, you have a son or a daughter, and they have a responsibility to do a book report or to tell a story in school, please do all that you can to keep Breonna Taylor's name alive. I know some people say, why harbor on painful situations that will continue to create racial divide? I don't believe it creates racial divide. Yeah. Just because we remember our history doesn't mean that it binds us to our history. As a matter of fact, I think it could set us free. And I think that if you begin to tell the truth about situations, it will enlighten those around you, and it'll be empowering. Here we have in the state of Illinois, right? Great city, Chicago, which helped start a youth center there and be a part of a great church there for a long time. And was excited about the time that I lived there with Christy and the first 3 little ones, and I can't wait to bring you back there someday for you to see the Windy City and put on a real Chicago coat.
Right, I've heard how cold it is.
But they are the first state in just a very small town to do this thing called reparations. Now, we know that reparations were paid
to white people.
Yeah, don't interrupt me too fast.
Sorry.
Steal that glory.
No.
But can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I know you've been engrossed in this storyline.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. This was fairly recent in the last couple of weeks, I believe. A city called Evanston in Illinois.
Yeah.
So first city in the United States to give reparations to Black people. Officially.
Okay.
So this is actually pretty cool.
It is cool.
So what they're giving reparations for is to a community that was injured by anti-black housing policies.
Redlining.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, that is what they're basing these reparations on.
Which is very, very true in Chicago. I mean, it's one of the predominant cities that it happened. One of the first cities to have things called projects.
Yes.
Now, the word project can give you indication that they were just trying to see, how does this work out? Mm-hmm. We put hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of very poor people on top of each other.
Yeah.
We're going to call this a project to see what this works out.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out too well.
No. So basically, that is what they're doing. This isn't based on slavery. This isn't reparations for that. This is reparations for things that are very much present. And people who are suffering because of them. And so what they're doing is they are giving $25,000 to each qualified person of color, family, household. Okay. And now there are specific qualifications of what you can use this money for. Now, what they're allowed to use it for is for home repairs, or they can use this as a down payment to purchase property or a new house.
So essentially driving their property value up.
Yes, they're trying to create better living conditions within these communities that have been suffering from this. And here's the really cool thing. So this is how they're paying for it. So over the next 10 years, their goal is to invest $10 million back into the black communities for housing development, right? Beautiful. It's an amazing thing, and it's beautiful, and I'm excited for it because it's going to change people's lives. It's going to change a whole community. It's going to elevate so many people in the state and the communities as a whole. But what they're doing is they have a 3% tax on the sale of recreational marijuana.
And so
what they're doing is they're taking the 3% taxes from that and they're putting that into the fund for the reparations.
Okay, so that's very interesting because most people don't realize that the very first count, the whole 3 strikes and out, whole Biden mishandled bullshit of the years gone by. That the first strike has often been marijuana charges.
Yes.
Right? And I think it's insane right now. You still have people locked away for life.
Yeah.
One of their primary charges is the use of marijuana. Right. And so you have a guy who was just trying to feed his family. Right. Now locked away for life. Right. Bound to this slavery system of the incarceration system.
Yeah.
Right. The prison system, and you have little 35-year-old Caucasian women getting awards for the business of the year.
Yeah.
So now at least they're going to do a little bit of good for people of color's community by taking 3% of the revenue sold and saying, what would you say? Because this is going to be interesting. What would you say to the white gentleman or the white sister? Is sister a good word for white people or?
Sure.
You my sister. You my brother.
Ma'am, miss.
Right. Whoever it may be, that would be very frustrated. They would say, well, why don't I get that $25,000? No, that's some bullshit.
Look, the truth is, now again, I've never been to Illinois, so I can't speak, but
there are very poor white neighborhoods as well.
These communities are specific for people of color. Like, I don't think that you're going to find a white person in these communities. I mean, maybe you could speak more to that than me, but the truth is when you look outside the communities and you look at who is hurting and who has been personally traumatized from what was done to them. So
from a systematic approach.
Yes. I mean, redlining targeted people of color specifically. So they weren't targeting white neighborhoods, they were targeting black neighborhoods. And so, this is very specific reparations for things that were done specifically against black people.
One of the most powerful talks I've had in a long time was with a brilliant guy by the name of James Bible. We actually have done an interview with him. Check it out.
Yes, we have.
We'll put a little link right in the comments area, wherever it goes. But he pointed out here in Seattle, for instance, we have a community in a specific area code that for years and years and years was the most diverse community in the country.
Right.
And everybody would get all excited about that. Hoop and holler. We have such diversity in Seattle. Seattle is a beautiful place. I'm proud to be here, and I love the unity amongst communities. It does happen here.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day when it was first established, the interesting thing is that was really the only community that was almost legal for people of color, of any color, black, yellow, Asian. That's not the right way to say that, but hopefully you get where I'm coming
Yellow,
from.
black, red, and white.
Right, that whole racist ass song, right?
Yeah.
But that were able to move into that community. So they were literally redlined into that community.
Mm-hmm.
And just across the street, over the bridge into the U District, for instance, it was illegal for a person of color, a black person, to purchase a home.
Yeah.
And so a unique story from James's perspective is his great-grandfather or grandfather, I believe it was one of the very first people of color to live in the U District. And they gave him such a hard time about it, but he backdoored it because he was in an interracial relationship.
He married a white woman,
which is, ooh, man, we talking about it steamy and hot right now. They talk shit about us, but they really talked it then, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you see it all over the country. And so people really, if you haven't had an opportunity to do much research or study into redlining, really before you make a judgment on whether or not you deserve it or how unfair it is or how this is really built just for people of color. And I'm so sick and tired of black people using the race card to get $25,000. Listen, the economic gap between people of color, black people, and Caucasians is astronomical.
It is.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the reason why predominantly is real estate.
Yep.
And the reason that real estate is the big deal is because we weren't allowed to own property whatsoever, number one.
Yes.
And then number two, we were driven into communities of despair,
Yep.
where they literally called our communities the projects,
Yeah.
right? Because government officials took stances to create a project where they sat around a little table and decided what was going to happen in that project, right? So, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Republicans are at it again.
Oh yeah, they're always at something.
There's definitely a state that's definitely on my mind today. We almost missed I grew up going to the derbies, to the races not every week, but almost every week with my daddy.
Yeah.
Okay? It was really kind of our bonding spot. And I would see my shoe money go away, or sometimes he wouldn't get a shoe money. He would get suit money. I mean, he would get paid doing this thing. But not long ago in Kentucky, horrible event that we just talked a little bit about.
Yeah.
But now there is a passing of a bill as a result of protesters turned riots. Break this off, because if this spreads across the country, we're going to have some issues.
Yeah, this is a very bad thing. So Republican-led Kentucky Senate just passed a bill making it a crime to taunt police officers. Now,
define taunt.
Yeah. So now I know when there was first talk about this before it actually became law, tons of people were in support. I mean, I saw so many comments on Facebook of people in support of this. You know, they need to protect the police officers. Now, look, I know during the Breonna Taylor protests and riots and stuff, I know that there was cops that were attacked, which is why this got put in place. But I think people are missing the bigger picture here.
Yeah,
and
100%.
So here,
and we are not in support of violence against police officers.
Of course not. Right, absolutely not. I mean, nobody is advocating for violence against cops. But I think they're missing, unfortunately, what got us into this mess in the first place. So here is how they define this new bill of taunting police officers. So anyone to accost, insult, taunt, or challenge a law enforcement officer with offensive words, or by gestures or other physical content that would have a direct tendency to provoke a violent response.
I provoked the response.
Yes. Can now be arrested and charged with bare minimum a misdemeanor and 90 days in jails and fines and penalties. So here's where we have a problem, okay? Kentucky, obviously, a woman was murdered in her own home, unarmed, by police officers who lied about a situation to cover their asses.
Who paid $12 million, I think.
And paid $12 million basically to make the situation.
That may not be the right number. But
it was $12 million to go away. And on top of that, we have a attorney general who helped cover up the whole thing to make sure that his cops weren't charged.
Make it so rotten.
Right. So here's where there is a problem. This is open to interpretation by the police officer.
So it's truly a feeling.
Yes.
It's a sense of my interpretation of what you're communicating to me.
I mean, this is how basic it can go. Say, I feel that a cop is being a jerk, right? They're harassing me a little bit. Maybe they stop me for no reason. And maybe I feel like, saying, hey, fuck you. You're being a dick. Well, guess what? Now he can arrest me and take me to jail because I was offensive.
Now, here's my genuine question to that. If you were to say, fuck you, to a police officer, in that little goofy ass, funny, sweet little shit that you do, what do you think the chances are that you're going to go to jail?
Probably not.
Now, if I, however, look a police officer in his eye at almost 50.
Yeah.
I'm almost 100 years old. I'm getting old as hell, y'all. And I were to look him in his face and say, fuck you. What do you think the chances are I'm going to jail?
I would say pretty significant. And
this is too far. This is too open to interpretation.
You think we have a problem now with the interactions between cops and people of color, and it's a problem. This is going to escalate it. This literally has given cops free reign to be complete assholes, and there's no protection for citizens from that. They can pretty much do what they want as long as it falls within those bounds, those categories, to be able to now arrest people. And I have a feeling that people, especially people of color who are used to being harassed by police officers, are not going to take kindly to being arrested because the cop felt they were offensive or showed aggressive behavior to them because they were being harassed by them.
And again, now this beckons to what I was talking about earlier with the whole concept of defunding the police.
Right.
My objection against it. I don't believe that we can defund the police. I think it's a very hard job. They need more resources, not less resources. Yes. They need to go from 6 weeks or whatever it is to 6 months. Mm-hmm. From 6 months to a year of training. Yeah. Okay? I believe they need in-depth psychological training. They need in-depth physical training. Right? I believe all those things. So I'm not saying that. But now how can you interpret culturally whether or not this person is being offensive,
right,
or whether he's actually telling you, good morning, how you doing today? I hope everything's 100%. Going well. I'm hoping for your best today. Survive this motherfucker. Because absolutely. I know I've given dap to a lot of people where I've brought them into my chest, gave them love and said, I hope you survive this motherfucker today. It's rough. But when you talk to a police officer, if you address it in the same way, I remember I was driving through Chicago. Okay, they are doing at the time a road check. So I don't know if it's legal everywhere, but it was legal in Chicago. It's one of them bullshit kind of laws to where basically they're checking for drugs. Right. It's a drug, but they call it a seatbelt check. Okay. So we pull up. We've just dropped off half our youth group. Right. So it's 12 o'clock at night, and we're having a good time. And I've got kids in the back, Christy in the front seat. Right, we're rolling. We're doing our thing. There's a seatbelt check. I'm not stupid enough not to have all our seatbelts on. Okay?
That's right.
We pull up to our point. He flashes his light 3 times in my kid's face till they screaming. Right. Then he looks at me. And I say, have a good night, officer. He says, pull right over there. And the reason why is because he said that I gave him a weird look.
Oh my gosh. A weird look.
A weird look and said, have a good night, officer. So why would I say to him, have a good night, officer, if I wasn't trying to fuck with his night? That was his interpretation of our interaction. And so, of course, they do a little search of the trunk and so forth. We had an SUV, so it was pretty simple as far as all goes. But it was still embarrassing. It's still 12 o'clock at night. It's Chicago, so my kids are cold. It's absolutely asinine. So when you look at situations like this, what extent of the abuse of power to demonstrate I run these streets?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what kind of training day moments will we have?
Yeah.
With Denzel Washington dying in the streets saying, I run these motherfuckers. I have Pelican. Bang!
Cops are already protected, essentially, and they get away with far more. I mean, the abuse of power is significant. We know this, okay? And this is going to give them even more ability to be able to abuse the situation. And if this spreads across the country, we are going to have a huge problem. Because the truth is, the cops are already protected. Who is going to protect us from the cops?
So well said.
I mean, because this law further protects them and puts us further, well, I say us, but people of color and black people, it's going to put you guys further at risk.
Let's be honest about it. Poor Caucasians are nothing but the next Negro.
That's true.
Right? And so one of the ways that they've divided us or kept us divided, and I say they, I mean specifically those who use race as a dividing point in our culture. They use it as a PowerPoint, right? One of the things that they've done is they've kept black people and white people separated by this thing called skin tone, when really it's socioeconomic status, right? And so if they can get away with it with us, they'll press it to get away with poor to middle class. Yeah. So all of a sudden we'll become a class system run by people we have no ability to influence, even though they work for us.
Yep.
They're employed by us, right? And so all I say is power to the people. Let's not let this shit go down, right? And so speaking of power to the people, all around the country there's an attack on voting rights.
Oh, gosh.
I had an in-depth conversation with somebody the other day that said voter suppression has never happened and certainly it's not happening now. But I need you to break off a little bit of this cake, okay? Cut me a slice and tell me a little bit about what's going on in our country with...
Republicans?
Yes.
But Republicans are on a roll right now.
And I love some Republicans. I was one
we were Republicans. So I want
and I hope maybe I can come back. Y'all got the money right.
I really want people to understand that we are not Democrats who just hate Republicans. Like, we were Republicans. And we saw the light. Like, we saw the truth, and we said, whoa, wait a minute. We don't like where this is heading. So we're going to talk a lot about Republicans because of the fact of what is really going on and what they are doing right now. So one of the biggest things that happened early on was Biden, when he became president, he greatly talked about a bipartisanship, right? His focus was
bring us together.
To bring us together. He really was
you think he was lying? Be honest.
No, I don't. I think that he genuinely... See, he got along with a lot of Republicans. Right. Now, back when Obama was president, of course,
he'd been there since Jesus was
he's been there a long time. He has a lot of friends in Congress, and he's been doing this a long time. So, he sat through and watched what happened when Obama was president. Republicans pretty much, just wouldn't agree to anything, just out of spite. And then we watched, when Trump was in office, Republicans were trying to destroy everything the Democrats want and, make sure that their agenda was passed. So you think he genuinely
wanted to see some harmony in both parties?
I think with everything that's happened over the last 4 or 5 years with Trump and how divided this country was and literally on a brink of just complete collapse, I think Biden really wanted to come into this and find a way to bring unity back and healing back to this country. So I do believe that he thought that he would be able to bring Republicans and Democrats together and, start making some decisions that involves everybody. Well, unfortunately, that has not been the case. And so Republicans have gone on the record just bashing Biden right now, saying that he clearly had no interest in bipartisanship. He's made a point with the passing of some of the bills that he's done that he has no interest. But let me clarify. It takes effort on both sides.
Are you trying to use that it takes two to tango?
It takes two to tango.
Okay.
Like, let's get a little dance in there. Let's do some tango. I mean, look, let's talk about the COVID relief bill for a second, okay?
Break it down.
So the House comes up with the bill, passes through the House, goes to the Senate. The Senate's like, okay, we like this, but Republicans are like, nope, we're not going to agree to this. So the Republican says, this is what we'll agree to. So Democrat says, okay, we'll make these concessions. Now, mind you, everything that the Republicans wanted removed from the COVID bill were things that would benefit the American people.
Okay, tell it.
Increase in minimum wage, extra unemployment benefits. The list just goes on with what they were trying
what was necessary.
Right, just things that would have benefited the people. So Republicans were like, no, we don't want that. So the Democrats just like, okay, fine, we'll take this out, we'll cut this back, we'll change this a little bit. Republicans also wanted to limit the people who qualified to be able to get the relief checks. So Democrats have said, okay, fine, we'll make a few more restrictions on who's allowed to get that. So after the Democrats actually made this big effort, they put all the Republicans wanted back into this bill, they made all these changes, and then they voted. Now, people, not one Republican senator, not one, voted for this bill. After they made all these demands and the Democrats changed it for them, not one of them still voted for it. Not one. Now, it still passed through the Senate because there was a Republican missing from the Senate at the time of the vote, and so the 50 Democrats were able to push it through. It went back to the House to be reapproved for the new changes that was made in the Senate. And again, I want to point out, not one House member, Republican, voted for the bill. Not one. This bill, the COVID relief bill for the American people, literally passed with zero approval from the Republicans.
No, that's not exactly true. There was an approval because they made adjustments. However, when it came time for them to actually show their vote,
not one voted for it.
They didn't show their courage.
No.
We'll use courage.
I don't know if that's
as
the
a
right
word there.
But
look, creating a world where we help the people.
Republicans voted to not help the American people. Even after the...
Wow. You were on fire, girl.
That happens.
Thank you so much for watching part 1 of this 2-part series on current events.
Yeah.
It is, 3:25 or so? About mid-month of March 2021. There's a lot going on.
So much happening the first few months of this year.
So we thought we would get all of it into one video this time. However, we're going to interrupt it into 2, catch a piece of it today. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to come back with part 2 in a couple days so you can enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And then we have an outstanding series that we're going to be presenting on...
racially motivated hate crimes in this country.
We've got so much going on, I didn't know what we were doing next, but I'm excited about that. So again, I'm Richard Thomas.
And I'm Tiffany Thomas.
And thank you so much for being a part of the Lionheart Institute podcast. Please subscribe, get involved, like, share, and make sure that you engage on our next video, which we're going to release in a couple days.